Hello, class. Just wanted to bring you another video showing you some development of code that you might find handy in lab activity number 9. Specifically, one of the responsibilities that you have in terms of programming a solution in lab activity 9 is outputting specific formatted information to a file. Now, up to this point, you've created output to a file using the write method, and we've done in the past to create a CSV file. This time what we're going to do is we're going to create a text file, but we're going to format the output using a print function and make use of one of the keyboard attributes inside the print function. If you refer to the document that I sent you just before 4th of July, and it's entitled Python's Built-in Output Tool, you'll see the syntax of the print function with some of the additional attributes or parameters that you're able to use with the print function. One is sep for separation, and in the document it shows what the default value is. So the default value for the separator attribute is one single space between the individual components in the print function. Another one of the attributes is end. And by default, there's a new line character that is going to be placed at the end of the output. So what happens is the output goes to the screen by default, and then a new line character is executed. And so the cursor goes to the next line and ready for the next block of data. One of the other attributes is referred to as file, and that's the one we're going to be focusing on tonight. If you take a look at the document, it'll say by default that the standard output of the print function is going to the standard output, which standard output for the hardware on the machine, typically a computer, is to the screen. Now, if you want to have the output redirected to a different device, in this particular case, I'm going to show you how to redirect it to a file. You have to bypass the default, which means you have to place something as the output device. So I'll show you how to do that here. If you take a look at the screen, nothing new here. The only thing that might be a little bit new that you are seeing maybe for the first time is the way that I declared and initialized the variables first name, last name, class name, section, and semester. They're all string variables. Historically, the declaration and initialization have happened one variable at a time. Python allows you to, if you're planning on initializing multiple variables to the same value, you can write them in this way. If you take a look at line 3 of my code, you'll see that what I have is the 5 string variables all equated to the null string. And it does save some space, but it's one way to do it. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it is a way you can do it. So what I have subsequent to the initialization of the 5 variables is that I'm actually capturing information using an input function, which you've been doing this since the beginning of the semester. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up right after I acquire all that data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to just do something really simple. I'm just going to use a print, and I'm going to create a heading that's going to be at the top of the list of data or the collection of data that I want to output to the screen first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a label that says last name. And actually, I don't need to do multiple strings output, because since this is a heading, I can do one big long string. So I'm just going to put the tab escape code, class name, and then followed by a tab escape character, and then section, tab, and semester. Then I can close it with a quotation mark. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is, instead of having multiple strings, last name and then another string, class name and another string, section, I'm putting it all as one string separated by the tab escape character. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to output the values that were input by the user in lines 5 through 9. So I'm going to go ahead and use the print function again. And what I'm going to do is I have to put the actual data. So this is going to be a little bit different because I can't do it as one big mega string I did before. So I'm just going to output the last name, class name. I have to put tab character. Notice that the tab character has to be encapsulated with the quotation marks. And then I'm going to have my section. And I have another tab character. And then I'll finish it with the semester. So once I have that done, I'm going to run this and see what it does and see how it works and see what the output is. There's a couple things I'm going to show you tonight. I'm going to reinforce. I'm going to be reinforcing the debugger, so you can see how to do that with your code as you're developing code for lab activity 9 and 10. So I'm going to go ahead and run this code for right now. And when I do, my output immediately is going to ask for the first name. I think what I'm going to do right now, I think I'm going to terminate execution, and I'm going to run this in debug because I want to give you an idea of what the variables are holding with the use of this new way of outputting, actually initializing the 5 string variables to null, or the null string. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint at line 5 of the code. So what's going to happen is it'll execute all lines of code up to line 5 and stop, or to suspend. It'll hold and wait for you to give it an instruction. So I'm going to put the breakpoint, and again, that's the most important thing, put the breakpoint first, and then go ahead and run it in debug. I clicked on run, choose debug, choose the code, and here's the output window. Now, upon executing line 3 of the code, I have all 5 string variables initialized to a null. And if you notice on the debugger tab of the PyCharm, it's showing that the 5 variables that are used to hold data, all listed as string, all holding null. So it's a convenient way of actually making multiple assignments on a single line. Okay, so we know that that works. I just wanted to show you how to use the debugger just now again. But at this point, I'm going to terminate and just going to run it straight out because it should work without a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and run. And I'm going to put, just put student. Last name is student last. Class you're in, CS 151. Section is section W01. And the semester is the summer of 2018. And I'm going to output 2 lines of data. So I see last name, class name, section, and semester. The output is there for the data. It's a little bit off, but we can always fix that so that it works. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of adjusting. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of more tab escape. That didn't show in the right spot. I'm going to put a couple of more tab escape codes. And I want to run it again and see what it does in terms of the output. Matter of fact, let me add a new line character here because it looks like new line. There's a new line. Let me run it again. Student L CS 151. Section is section W01, and then semester offered is summer of 2018. And good, it looks good. So you're seeing what we're doing in terms of just trying to get formatted output. So Now that I have that, um, what I'd like to do is do the same thing. Instead of just sending it to the screen, I'd like to send it to the screen and send it to a file. And I'm going to show you how to use that file attribute um, in the print function. And we use it just like we did with the sep and the end attribute. And so we'll see how we can use that. But if we're going to send it to a file, remember in Python that the strategy for dealing with sending data or receiving data from a file, sending data to a file, you first have to open the file. You have to assign the file name to an object name, a file object name. Then you have once you open the file for reading or writing in this case, you have the license, if you will, to do the activity in terms of reading or writing, in this case, writing. And then once you're done, you want to make sure you close your data file. The reason I'm saying that repetitively is that oftentimes, depending on the way that you open up the file for writing, the only time that the data is actually fully sent to the file is when you close it. It actually takes the data which is held in temporary memory and it writes everything to the screen. Now, you may think this would be sitting there saying, what's the big deal? If you're running your program in debug and you have a write command, or in this case, we're going to be using the file attribute. If you execute the line and you have the data file open, you may not see the data being written to the file because the data is going to be written to the file once the file is closed at the end. If you never close it, Python will purge that data in some cases. All right. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to move my code a little bit and I'm going to give it an object name. So I'll just call it output file. That's my object name, is equal to, if you recall, open. And then we're going to give it a name. Before, in one of your other exercises, you asked for the file name, assigned it to a variable, and then use the variable here. And here, I'm not going to ask the user what the file name is. I'm just going to give it a name. So, what am I going to give it? Let's do it. Let's make it output data.txt. And I'm going to run this in, not read mode, write mode. Okay. So I have my output. I have my file name, output data.txt. I'm going to set this file up as a write mode, not read, write mode. And I'm going to associate the file object name output file with output data.txt. Okay, so now that the file is open, I now have the ability to write data to the file. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to take these two lines of output and actually send the exact information right not only to the screen, but also to the file. So I can do it one of two ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this data. I highlighted and copied. And then I'm going to repeat it on the very next line. And what that will do is I have all the data that I want, but I have to add one additional component on this particular line, line 14. I have to add the file attribute or the file parameter, which allows me to tell Python, no, just don't send it to the screen in line 13. I want you to send it to a file on line 14. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to get to the end of the line of data, use the comma, and I'm going to type in file equals, and what it's looking for now, it's looking for the object name. Okay, so the object name or the file object name that we're going to be using, because we're sending it to a file, is output file. Okay, and that's it. I'm going to do the same thing with this data, which is the actual data from when I gathered the information from the user. And I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to back up a little bit and put a comma in, and then use the attribute file equals output file, the object name. Okay, so line 13 will send it to the screen. Line 14 will redirect the same data to the output file. Line 15 will send the information to the screen. Line 16 will send the exact same data to the output file. Now, you may find that you have to tweak the tab escape characters because the way that the data is processed to the screen may be different from the way that the data gets processed to the file. So the only way to actually do that, to take a look at it, is to run it, see what it looks like, and tweak it accordingly. Okay, so before I get any further, that's my, this is the folder that I have my source code in, and that is the, I have a special folder and I have my source code. We'll be looking at this folder in a moment after we run the code. So I'm going to go ahead and run the code again. Let me go ahead. Actually, let me run this in debug. Only I know that this beginning part works. Let me go ahead and put a breakpoint at the first print function. Run it. So let's see what it looks like. We can just take it piece by piece. So I'm going to run it in debug. My code is called special print. And here we go. Okay, so the first name, student. We know this code works because it was working before. I didn't make any modifications to it. And it's one of the reasons why you want to use the debugger. You get a block of code working first, you move the breakpoint down. Get that code working, move the breakpoint down. This way you get an idea of exactly what's working and what's not working. The class you're in, CS151. I'll change it up a little bit. I'll say section 01. Semester, spring of 2020. And then there we go. So let's just take a look and see if the data is being held right. First name, student. Last name, student L. Notice that it has two tabs here. We have the debugger tab and the console tab. The debugger tab shows you what the variables are. Last name is student L. Okay, output file. This is the object name associated with the file that's opened, and the output file, output data.txt is the file name. So this did it correctly. The section number is a string, 01, and then the semester is spring 2020. Now, if this works, I'm just going to, if you recall from using debugger, this little diagonal teal arrow with the underline is the step into key. So if I want to execute one line at a time, so I'm going to go click on the step into. And if I go to the console, it just executed the output of the heading. Last name, class name, section, and semester. I'm going to go ahead and click. I'm going to stay on the console tab because I want to see what the output is. So I'm going to single step again. And what happened? Well, if you look at line 13 is the output to the screen, which we see it. Line 14 is an output to a file. And since we're using the output file object name from line 5, and output file, the file object name is associated with output data.txt, in write mode, the data went there instead. Now, I'm going to open up the file folder to see, there's the file. That's the file. It's been created. So let me finish the execution of the two other lines of code for the output, and let's see what it looks like. Now, line 15 is a print function with the pieces that I want output to the screen. Notice there's no file attribute at the end. So when I click on single step, my data appears on the screen. If I single step again, which is the last line of code, it's not going to appear on the screen because it's been, the data has been, or the output has been redirected using this parameter called file equals output file. It'll go to the output file. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, one thing we didn't do. Do you see it? Everything looks good. I'm missing one line of code. Can you see what it is? I'm hoping you're saying, wait a minute, you forgot to close the data file. And that's exactly right. So let's go ahead and do that. And the way you do that is use the file object name, which is output file dot close. And that's that. Now, we can't add code and just continue to run. We have to stop it and we have to run it again. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. And I'm just going to put the data in again. I know I spelled it wrong. See, that's 151. Section 02. Semester is spring of 2019. And there's my variables. Everything looks good. I'm going to switch over to the console mode. And then I'm going to single step. 1, 2. So 1 to the screen, 1 to the file. 1 to the screen, 1 to the file. Close the data file, and we're done. Now, just in case you need to see it, exit code 0 means your program terminated properly. Exit code 1 or other codes signify that something else is going on. Okay, so let's take a look at the data file. So you'll notice that there's the Python source code file, and here's the output file. Now, it looks kind of funky because I have a restricted screen, but here's our output file. Here's my heading. I got my output. We may have to make a modification to the tab escape codes that are in the output line to the screen, which has the actual data in it, but you get the general idea, okay? So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to make some modifications. I think I have to get rid of this tab code. Let's try to run it this way, and I'm just going to run it without having to use the debugger. So I'm going to take the breakpoint out of the way and just run it. Student, I got this thing with spelling that one wrong. Student L, MAT 251, section is 99, semester is summer of 2018. Okay. Even to the screen, did I put it in the right area? Let's take a look here. So let's take a look at the output data. I may not need this second code. Let's just try to run it again. Oh boy, oh, I got rid of a quotation mark. And let's run it and see what it looks like. Student L. I'm just going to put blah, blah, blah. 99, summer of 18, and there it goes. Okay, so let's take a look at the output file and see what that looks like. And output data looks beautiful. I have a heading, last name, class name, section, and semester. Last name, class name, section number, and semester. Okay, so I've achieved the goal. So what I've done is I just demonstrated how to use a different form of sending data to a file. You may say, well, that looks a heck of a lot easier than using a whole bunch of write methods. Well, this is good for some instances where you have formatted data and you want it to look exactly like what you have to the screen. Using the write data, you have a little bit more control of exactly what you want to appear in the file, but it is another methodology that you can use to get output in terms of the screen. So I'll post this video to the class Moodle site, and hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of it when you're working with your